I wanted to ask a little bit more about what was going on in the Bay Area in the 60s and 70s. And did you know that, had you heard anything about the Merry Pranksters when Stewart showed up to work for you? Did you know about that whole scene over the hill and what he was involved in?
I don't know, but I don't think it would have made much difference.
Yeah, but you don't remember the Ken Kesey crowd or the Grateful Dead or...
Sure, I remember them, but it just seemed kind of remote from what we were doing.
Yeah. Was Stewart Brand with you for very long, or it was a pretty narrow period when you were preparing? He came as a sort of consultant helper?
Well, it was just, hey, we need somebody else to sweep or something at this time. Can you spare a day? And so it was a relatively unskilled thing of running a camera, because we had, the way we generate our displays, we had a whole array of video cameras, each of them looking at a small CRT, and that's how the video was generated and got in the lab. And there were definite advantages of that, technically, etc., that one computer could drive a lot more that way, because that CRT could actually be blinking, but that you can adjust the camera so that it is slow in response, and it smooths it out for you here, so that you didn't have a blinking display, but the computer could write them all.
Yeah, but you needed people to help.
Then we had those cameras available to move around and get studio shots sort of during the 68 demonstration. So we borrowed tripods and moving things, and we just needed some people that could come and do that. And that's
where he came from.
Yeah, because we'd just been acquainted with him, and he was somebody that would say, oh, sure, it'd be interesting to try that.
Now, had you had any contact with the Whole Earth catalog?
Well, I don't think it was out yet. It was just something he was working on, so he'd tell us about it. And it's sure, that's neat to be trying that, but it grew into something quite different from what he was telling us. He really had in mind, he wanted to have a catalog that would go out to all the experimental communities to tell them what they could buy. And it really turned out to be something quite different, but much more successful.
And did you put yourself in the category of an experimental community? Were you thinking about the world in that context?
Not in the way he was. He was, right?
Yours was a cyber community as opposed to
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You told me that being a manager was like the hardest thing, and I was wondering if you could sort of relate some of the war stories of just the hassles that you had to go through as part of managing the project.
Well, I see there were two things. One is it was such a novel approach or something that the classical management as practiced in research communities or environments at that time didn't sort of hold very well, because the picture of a lab manager was that he wanted to see that his researchers stayed employed. So mostly the contracts they would get would be 1, 2, 3 persons contracts, and he'd help them be sure they were aware of chances to write proposals and get the money and do the projects. And here we were working on one comprehensive program, see, and so that's one difference. And the second place is I really didn't understand how to manage. I just essentially was a farm kid, wandered into this and had my own idea like that. So I wasn't good at that. And so some of the stresses that went on were because of that.
Yeah.
And
what kinds of things would you, I mean, is in terms of the sort of hiring and firing stresses or getting people to do the right stuff that they committed to do?
No, it was sort of more subtle than that. It was like when somebody has a project, how do you have project meetings and reports? Or we get so many dollars coming in for this year for this. How do you get a budget set up so you know how many people you can hire? Boy, I never did find out how to make a budget. So it was always somebody like Bill English who would come to, well, we can just use it to do this and this. And then also the specific projects, how to build something. I just didn't know about, because I'd never had the experience of working in an environment where you sort of, hey, by this time you do what and get it sketched out. So it was a very loose kind of way to do it, which in one way let a lot more creativity go on, but in another way could make it very frustrating for the people working in the lab.
Yeah. Now, Licklider, I mean, he didn't come to you as a manager. He came to you because of this particular idea.
Right.
And where did you meet Licklider for the first time?
I think it was probably when he had that job there at ARPA.
He came and visited.
Well, I think I might have gone there.
Okay. But had he already seen your report at that point, so he knew a little bit about your ideas before you?
Well, I think it's when we write a proposal and it goes there. Here's the whole kit that goes along and supports it. And I'm not sure whether, I can't remember well enough, but you know, that 1962 report that's fairly thick, and it just had the essence in it of almost everything since, a lot of which hasn't been able to flourish in concepts out there.
But Licklider had seen that report.
I'm sure it must have been included in a bundle that went along with the proposal.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much it... See, the big difference in there from current time at that time, and still a factor, is that at that time everyone was talking about automation. And especially in the 70s, it's automating the office place. And the concepts that I'd emerged with, because of the scaling experience studying like that, this is going to be so big, we're going to just be, so many things are going to get changed in our rest of our world. We can't think of it as just automating, because there are going to be all these other changes. We have to do the co-evolution of the two sides. And you say all of this stuff augments our basic human, genetically endowed capabilities.
And did you know about Memex?
Yeah.
So you had contact with the ideas.
Well, as a matter of fact, I discovered I was sitting in a camp by the edge of the jungle in the sea in Philippines in 1945, and waited to get reassigned out there someplace in the Navy. And I'd wandered into this Red Cross library that was up on a Filipino native hut, a Red Cross library, and of course there was nobody around. Somehow no other sailors were interested in the library. So that's where I was hanging out for a couple of days, and I found the Life magazine with that article in it. And it was I really just said, gee, that's terrific. But when I actually started working through and came up with the sort of much more explicit ideas of what we wanted to do, came from this thing of looking at all this set of things, the list of, from the way your organizations are structured, to the conventions, to the roles in your organization, to your language, to your skills, to your learning, all of that all of those are subject to change. And I said, wow, there are going to be surprises every place. Where would you want to focus first? So I picked on the language and
Focus.
the idea of how do you take the concepts that are so important part of our mechanism in here and externalize them. And we use language in now, but boy, externalizing them in a computer could be very different, because in the first place, a computer could help you externalize them, and it could also help you portray them and manipulate them and communicate them.
Now, do you think it's possible that you evolved Bush's ideas from running across them in that Atlantic magazine? But Licklider was familiar with
I don't
them.
remember. When I went through that and thought of all the different ways, and the citation ability is something was just right in there like that, and I don't have a conscious memory of connecting it back there, but it's okay with me if it were sitting there, I'm unconscious or something like that, because that was a very good idea.
But now Licklider had run across Bush's ideas as well. And do you think it's possible that he saw your efforts to develop some of those ideas when he saw your report?
I don't know. No way of knowing.
Yeah. And did you guys, when you went back there and talked to them, what was on his mind when you visited?
Well, he was charged with trying to get something going in a new kind of program that there wasn't any precedent. And the interactive computing and very soon time sharing, so the computers could support more than one person at a time interacting. And so, other proposals coming in were how you do time sharing and how you do artificial intelligence that's going to make computers so smart you don't have to have an interface or something. So it was just sort of fit into his domain, so it's almost like he was shamed. And I think he liked me. He was like a big brother for me. But some years later, it turned out that our perceptions about how this should work were just very different. When he came by again in 75 or 76, someplace in there, he was for a short period of time back with ARPA. We were so proud. We'd been supporting customers over there. We'd actually gotten to the point where I was hiring women like Anne, had liberal arts education and could be the trainers and support persons. So not a software guy, but somebody like that, and telling him about all this. And he was straightening up in his chair like this. And, well, what's the matter, Lick? He says, you just told me that your system's no damn good, see? And all our jaws just dropped. He says, well, what do you mean? He says, if it was any good at all, you wouldn't need people that have to show people how it does it. The system itself would give them everything they need. And it just dumbfounded us. What his picture was, no one else, even in the AI, had anything even simple in the way of doing that. So,
were his expectations unreasonable? Is that where, he sort of was out of touch?
Oh, show us an example of something that really has the kind of utility you're going to want, that you do that. And even today, they don't do what he was assuming you could do. And it just really dumbfounded me, because I thought we were seeing things very close to each other, but that was part of the collapse of...
Had his vision changed, or was he just not in touch?
I don't know. See,
more on the history of the period during the anti-war movement, were you ever worried about the physical safety of the systems that you'd built?
Not really. I guess I just remember one event, maybe they were more of looking out and seeing all the crowd out there of students protesting and making noise. And I guess it occurred to me if they broke in, but I just don't think I could imagine it. And I'd faced a mob of students once before.
You said you'd faced a mob of students. What happened?
Well, this was it was at Oregon State University, where I went back to finish after the war, and I joined a fraternity, and somehow a lot of the veterans really got anti-fraternity or something, and I joined because my brother belonged, but it turned out to be a terrific experience for me. But somehow one night, they'd been going to make trouble. One night there were about 80 of them making noises right across the street and shouting, cheering like that. So it was sort of like, what are they going to do? Charge us, tear things down? And the really funny difference there was that the younger kids who hadn't been in the service, boy, let's get baseball bats, we'll take them on. And the veterans were all saying, hey, cool it, man, somebody can get hurt, Anyway, it was just watching it to realize that even if it could sound pretty ominous or something like that, that it takes a lot for them to actually break and start assaulting things. So I didn't worry.
But you only remember the one anti-war demonstration that came anywhere close to SRI.
That's all I remember. Right.
But you must have run into them all over the peninsula.
Yeah, and a funny thing like this was, I was at that time traveling around the country, talking to different universities, trying to get more people aware of what the network was going to be able to do, because we had this role in the network like that. And I remember going to Harvard and other universities who all looked down their nose at what you guys have going on in the West Coast. What a bunch of dissolute people you have like that. And 2 years later, I get there to Harvard, and I can't get to the place where I'm going inside of Harvard because there's a student riot going on. And I thought it was just another sign that they were behind it.
And you were never challenged when you spoke around the country by people who thought that you were doing war work or anything like that, where you didn't have to face that kind of...
No, it was just... as I think I said earlier, that none of the people involved in doing any of this network thing or anything like that were fixed on it being just a military thing at all. They were all talking, like Licklider would be talking about, what we really ought to call this is the beginning of the galactic network, see? And he was using that term quite often, so it just...
And you bought into that idea as well. That made sense to you.
For me, the whole thing was what it would do for this kind of collaborative knowledge work and exchange, just like what the web's doing now. See, in fact, I remember in some meeting in my lab, I tried to tell them that, the real test is going to be when we actually start supporting the distributed communities, and how do we get a community connected like this? See? And boy, when I heard them talking about this experimental network, it was terrific. And,
one of the things that Bill and Ann have said is that out of the Augment group, there were lots of relationships that emerged.
yeah.
Any sense, what was special about your group? I mean, is that just normal of any group that's that close together, or was there some special chemistry that was going on?
I don't think it was normal. There was something different because the whole laboratory was involved in a fairly unified thing, building and using and testing and evaluating, et cetera, the system. And the people out in the field were sort of trained how they send in field reports about bugs that show up. And, the software guys fixed up a special ways in which those messages could then be handled, et cetera. So it was very unified and very different from the outside world and made a coherence. And so it just, didn't surprise me that these things appeared.
Did it feel like a family a lot?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were a patriarch in some sense?
They used to, when they changed the name to the Augmentation Research Center, then it's ARC. And so, of course, I would get called Noah every once in a while, see.
Were you comfortable with that?
Well, it's okay, except I really didn't feel like I was the leader very much. It was pointing and such as that, but a lot of cases of things that got innovated in there that are very significant is I remember the time when somebody had come and says, well, here's what we're doing now. We've got this remote procedure call that we need to work and stuff like that. Oh, what's a remote procedure call? Well, they'd have to explain it to me, something like that. And so, oh, that sounds like a good idea. So there was just a lot of spontaneous good things that would...
But from almost everybody who was in your group, I get the sense that they really respected you as the keeper of the vision. And
well,
that was your point. That's the vector.
Never. It's just been there almost 50 years now. Trying to find a way to characterize it and formulate a strategic thing that the world could really do that would go after it. And,